Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We are going to get started shortly. Please make sure you are on mute unless you have been recognized to speak. We're expecting almost 200 people on this call today, so it is going to be a crowded room. Thank you all for joining. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just waiting a couple of minutes for more folks to join, and then we will get started with our program. While we're waiting, feel free to get a head start and go to www.menti.com in a separate browser outside of Zoom and type in the code at the bottom of the screen that you see at the bottom of the screen on Zoom. So it'd be 5435666. I'll give fuller instructions a little bit later, but if you want something to do while we're waiting for folks to join, just head to menti.com and get yourself set up on there, as we will be using that tool to collect your questions and comments and concerns throughout the town hall. Welcome, everybody. We are about to get started in 1 minute. While you're waiting, please feel free to go to www.menti.com and use the code that's at the bottom of the slide. It's 5435666. I'll give more instructions later on, but if you would like to get a head start now, feel free to do that. All right, I think we're in a good place to get started. So if everyone would please make sure that they are muted so we can all hear all the speakers, that would be wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual town hall on early learning, the updated child care subsidy payment guidance, and the COVID-19 health and safety guidelines. My name is Rakaya Ambar Shaheen, Director of Early Childhood at DC Action for Children. I'll be your host today, and we're hosting this town hall alongside our partners, the DC Association for the Education of Young Children, the DC Early Learning Collaborative, the DC Family Child Care Association, the DC Head Start Association, the Directors Exchange, and the Washington Association of Child Care Centers. Today is the second town hall we've hosted to hold space for early educators and child care business owners to ask questions and share their reactions and feedback to the new child care subsidy payment guidance and COVID-19 health and safety guidelines. As you all know, last week, OSSI shared its updated plans to return to attendance-based child care subsidy payments for all providers starting on November 1st. During our last town hall, Sarah Mead, Assistant Superintendent for Early Learning at OSSI, shared the details of this updated guidance, and you all had so many questions we couldn't get through them all. We also heard anxiety about the implications of the guidance and a desire to hear more clarity and coordination. We ended by asking OSSI to collaborate with the early learning community to work on its next steps in developing and implementing child care subsidy payment guidance and to delay the return to attendance-based payments. Today, we thank Sarah Mead for joining us again to continue answering your questions and hearing your concerns about the payment guidance and other issues. We're also joined by Dr. Anil Mangla, infectious disease and public health epidemiologist with DC Health, who is here to answer your questions, I hope, and your concerns about the health and safety guidelines. Dr. Mangla, have you joined? Well, hopefully he will join shortly. Before we turn it over to Sarah, I want to talk to you a little bit about the ways you can participate today. There are two main ways you can ask a question or make a comment. The first is you can raise your hand to be recognized. You should be able to do that. If you open the chat window, there's a little button where you can ask to raise your hand. Jamar will be keeping track of the raised hands and will be calling on folks in order of when they raise their hands. Given the number of people on the phone today and the limited amount of time that we have, we may not get to every question today, but we'll do our best. I ask that you please only unmute yourself to speak when I have recognized you to speak. The second way you can participate is to submit questions and comments anonymously through Mentimeter. Jared is making sure I can see all of your questions and concerns, and I'll be reading them aloud and directing them to the guest best positioned to respond to them. As with in-person questions, we will likely have more questions than we can answer today. Last time we submitted 3 pages of unanswered questions to OSSI. If your question is not answered today, we will be sharing it with OSSI or DC Health to make sure that it is considered. Thank you for your patience, and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible today. Now let's take a look at Mentimeter and get that set up so you're able to participate using that tool. First, on the screen, you can see the website. If we can switch back to that for a second. It's www.menti.com. And once you go to that website, you can do that in your browser. So it's on Chrome or Safari, Firefox, Internet Explorer. Wherever you go to do Google searches or type in web addresses, you can type www.menti.com, M-E-N-T-I, if you're on the phone, .com. The code, there will be a place to put a code in, and that code is 5435666. Again, if you're on the phone, I'll repeat it. It's 5435666. Once you go to menti.com and you type that code and hit next, you should see a question pop up. And we will know how many people have been able to get onto Menti based on how many people have answered the question. Looks like right now, we have 42 responses and we have 125 people on the line. So I think you guys are still working to get to the page. Let me know if you have any questions about how to get to the page. And we can make sure that you get access. I'm noticing that the chat is disabled, so you will not be able to raise your hand, but I will make sure we get that re-enabled so that everyone can ask their questions. All right. Last time I'll say it, it's www.menti.com. And the code you'll type in once you get to that page is 5435666. All right, so let's see what we have. Right now, the question that should show up for you is, what is your current opening status? If you're not if you're not an early learning educator or childcare business, you can just hit NA. That's the last choice. And right now we're seeing that the majority of people are currently open and providing services either in person, virtually, or both. So if you could please head to menti.com and answer that question, we'll know everyone is there. I am going to move on. So once you're done answering that question, you can hit the next box on the bottom, and that will take you to the next question. The next two questions are the same. They're just for different speakers. So the first is for Sarah. If you have any questions or comments for Sarah, you would enter it into that second question. And if you have any questions for Dr. Mangla, it will be in the third question. If you want to navigate back and forth between the questions, you won't be able to do it on the Mentimeter website, but you can do it in your browser. So if you hit the back button, it should be able to take you back to questions that you've already answered. If you're having a hard time doing that, feel free to just start over, go to menti.com and type the code in again and move through those questions again. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them and we'll make sure to get back to you. There are several people on the line who can answer questions. All right. Sarah, would you please introduce yourself and share where we are in the world and kind of what opportunities there are today and other days to hear feedback from providers about some of the things that are happening?
Yes, thanks, Rakaya. Can you all hear me? Okay, great, thanks. So thank you to DC Action for Children and the other organizations. I won't list all of you again, but I deeply appreciate all of your role in providing this forum for engagement between myself, Dr. Mangla, and the broader early childhood community in the District of Columbia. We have been working through a variety of our own mechanisms to engage with folks, but it is always good to have additional ways that may bring other people to the table in conversation, and I deeply appreciate the work that DC Action for Children and the other partners hosting this event have done to put this together tonight. I also just want to appreciate all of you for taking time to join the conversation. I know that this is a time when people are juggling a lot of responsibilities, and we deeply value the opportunity to hear from you both the feedback that you have from us and questions, with a sincere desire to answer as many questions as possible. I am Sarah Maid. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Early Learning with the Division of Early Learning with the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. And I am here tonight because we have heard extensive feedback from many folks across the early childhood community in the district, both on the substance of the subsidy policy and related policy changes that we released last week, as well as on the ongoing collaboration between OSSI, other city agencies, and the early childhood care and education community in the District of Columbia. I want to acknowledge that we take both sets of that feedback seriously and that we intend to sort of listen to you and respond on both of them. In terms of the feedback specifically on the subsidy policy, I do believe that that decision has been made, and I would really urge people to act as if this is a decision that is going to move forward. However, we have also heard very, very clearly from you about a variety of concerns that people have about this policy, as well as a variety of questions that need to be answered. And we are eager to work with this community to address those concerns and look for ways to mitigate some of the factors that people have raised concerns about. It is our intention firmly to work in a variety of ways to support the childcare sector during this time. Subsidy is one of the ways, and a very important way, that we support early care and education for families, children, and the childcare sector. And it's been an important way that we have been supporting the childcare sector during this time of COVID-related disruption. However, we are also looking at other ways we can provide financial support for the childcare sector going forward in concert with this policy change. We are looking at how we can use our regulatory powers to support childcare providers in navigating this situation. And we're also using the range of technical assistance, support, and other tools that we have for childcare providers in other times. I'm happy that Dale Brown from DC Childcare Connections is able to join me today. I know they are doing very important work, both to provide information and support and resources for childcare providers and families, to stand up sort of support for folks who are looking for employment opportunities, as well as folks who are seeking their workforce, and also helping connect families with care, which is a very important need at this time for folks. And we are also working through our quality facilitators and some of the other resources that we have. All of those things are things that we intend to move forward to do, but we really want to make sure that we are doing them and acting in a way that makes sense and is responsive to the needs of this community. So my goal in this conversation really is to hear from you so that as we think about the ways we are able to operate in this time and the ways we may be able to work with other partners, both within and outside of district government, we have a solid understanding of what you are experiencing, what you're concerned about, and we're getting feedback and input from you to inform that conversation. I believe that there will be other conversations going forward, both in large group contexts and in smaller group contexts with different networks of folks that may already be engaging around different issues with folks that we have connections to through the Quinn, through the PKEEP program and other ways. And I am committed to continuing to listen to you going forward.
Thank you, Sarah. Has Dr. Mangla joined the call? All right. Well, hopefully he will join shortly. In that case, we can just hop straight into questions. So I will start sifting through the questions and I'll share them as they come in. But I see that we have someone with their hand up. So why don't we get started with you? We have Shri Lee Thomas with your hand up. You can unmute yourself.
My hand was up, but I put it back down once the chat opened back up. So I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, got it. All right. Am I looking at the right ones? Yes. Okay. The first question is, how will centers that are open with allowable attendance be supported with a reduction in revenue?
Yeah, that is a great question. And we do understand that the health and safety guidelines in place have reduced for a number of people the capacity and number of children that you are able to serve. And we've also heard from folks that there's wide variation in people's experience of families wanting to come back. We've heard from some childcare facilities that have told us they have wait lists and families that are desperate to come back that they can't accommodate. And we've heard from others of you who have said that you have open spaces and the families haven't come back. And we know that both those realities can be true at the same time. We understand that the shift to payment based on subsidy, based on attendance for folks who are serving fewer children than usual at this time may result in reductions in revenues. We're looking at what are some of the other options that we can work through the financial resources through the local portion of our subsidy funding in order to help address that for people. There's a variety of different options that could potentially come into play. We're having conversations with smaller groups. We're doing analysis on our end to get some input on what those could look like. And I think the kinds of information we hear from you in this conversation and other settings can help inform thinking about what those might look like. But we are fully intending to provide additional financial support to folks.
We have another person with their hand raised, Nora Goldring.
Yes, hello. My question is, with the reduction of our enrollment, do we need to change our license or CFO because of the low numbers, or do the license and the CFO stays the same? So if we had a capacity for 100 children, but now we have 50 children, do we need to change our license or our CFO?
As long as you are operating within the existing license, so the number is not exceeding the number in the license, and you're serving the ages of children and the sort of types of care that are covered in your license, you don't need to change the license. If you were making a change that would result in serving additional age groups of children that aren't covered by your license, or you were going to be serving more children than are included in your license, then you would need to make a change in the license potentially.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for the question.
Sarah Ferrand has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned other possible ways of helping financially to the institutions that are needed, because just so that I'm sure that you know, but just so that we understand how and who's going to get the help. Like, is there a priority on open and servicing people more on person? So two things. What kind of financial help? Like, where's the guidance so that we have at least some kind of idea? Because I'm also thinking of timeline. So the subsidy agreement paid by enrollment ends in September and October starting soon. So when is that? Like, what kind of ideas? What, how, just some kind of hope. And number two, I remember last time we were talking a lot about how do we get compensated for the work that we're doing virtually with our students. There's many children that parents don't want to bring their kids in, and we're helping them virtually. So how do we get help that way, financial help? Or can we count them with attendance if we take real good attendance every time they are in a virtual meeting with a teacher? So yeah, timeline, what kind of financial help, just more clear, because I think a lot of us are really, really worried.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you for asking those questions. First, on the timeline. In terms of the timeline, the current subsidy payment based on the average past payments has been extended through the end of October. So it won't end at the end of September, it will end at the end of October. Because of the way our payments happen, they're retrospective. So payment happens in 1 month for the month before. So in November, people will receive payment that was based on the services in October, which will be the same as the payment you've been receiving the past few months. So we will change to paying based on attendance at the beginning of November. The first time you would actually see the change is in December. We realize that that is still a timeline that is shorter than many people would like to have, and we understand that there are lots of questions that are still unaddressed. We're working right now in terms of the other financial assistance piece to get input from a variety of folks in the community. We've heard about things like lower enrollments, we've heard about things like virtual learning, and we are working to take all those things into account while looking at the constraints we operate under to answer some of those questions. We're going to get that input and hear from people. We'll be in a stage of hearing that for some time, but our goal is to communicate with you on those answers as soon as possible.
Everyone, just a reminder, if you are not speaking right now, will you please mute your line? Thank you. The next question is, so if a parent, this is from the chat, so if a parent does not feel safe and does not want to return, does not want in-school learning, what will happen to the child's education since distance learning is not an option? And I'll just pair that with another question from the Menti, which is, will OSSI consider doing a rate for virtual learning?
I was feeling that someone would ask me to visit.
Sorry, I got distracted because somebody was talking. And I also want to ask, has Dr. Mangla joined yet? Because I do want to make sure that we do cover the questions about families feeling safe and healthy in childcare as well. And wanted to see if he had anything to weigh in on that before we responded to the other pieces of that question.
Doesn't seem like he's joined. The team is keeping an eye on the guest list,
Okay.
and as soon as he does, we will let everyone know.
Great. I just wanted to give him a chance to weigh in on that if he had things he wanted to say. So currently, children receiving subsidized care must attend in-person care to be considered present for the day. Our understanding is that child care subsidies are intended to support both learning and development for young children and to provide access for in-person care. OSSI continued subsidy payments for close providers during the public health emergency in order to provide continuity for the child care sector. And while there are some child care providers who chose to provide remote learning and supports for families during that time, those continued subsidy payments were not a payment for virtual learning. And we did not, as OSSI, mandate that child care providers offer virtual learning. We have used our authority to grant waivers for PKEEP providers to allow PKEEP providers to operate virtual or hybrid programs for the current school year. And we know that the Federal Office of Head Start directed Head Start grantees to continue to provide services to children and families, even if they were or are closed during the public health emergency. We have heard from this community that early childhood programs are delivering innovative remote learning and supports for children and families, and that some families want these services. This is something that we're seeking to hear more about from you as we work with the community to determine how best to use our resources to support the childcare sector, children, and families.
Thank you. The next question is from the Mentimeter, and then I will go back to the chat for those responses. The question is if your license is expired and you're waiting to renew, can you still open up?
Because that's a question involving a pretty specific individual circumstance, I'm gonna suggest following up on that one offline. I can speak to some broader questions, but I don't want to accidentally give people the wrong advice without knowing more details about your individual circumstance. But if you can connect with us offline, I'm happy to follow up and make sure you get an answer on that.
Great. So the next question from the chat is, are your conversations with the actual providers who are on the front lines?
Yes, we have a variety of ways of engaging with providers on the front lines, and we are also working with some of the organizations that have hosted this meeting to bring together some providers in separate contexts for additional conversations to help inform our work.
Okay, let me see if there's anyone waiting with their hand up. Yes, can Robert Gunling unmute yourself, please?
Hi, Sarah. So I have a question. It's my understanding that Maryland has increased the number of children that are allowed to be in a center. And yesterday I learned that Virginia is moving into phase 3, where they're actually lifting all requirements for number of children in a center, so that centers and homes can, if they want, operate with maximum occupancy. And they actually showed a dashboard they have where their Department of Health is actually collecting the information as to the numbers of incidences of the coronavirus in licensed facilities. And it was that data that they emphasized they used to make that decision. So two-part question. One, and I acknowledge you may not be able to answer this, is the DC Department of Health collecting data about the number of incidents of coronavirus reported at centers and homes? And if so, is it available somewhere on their website? And my second question is there anything going on regionally among the departments of health to coordinate efforts so that policies could be as uniform as possible, knowing that families travel within Maryland, DC, and Virginia?
I very much appreciate that question, Robert. It's a question that I know a number of people have been asking. So I don't want to speak for DC Health if they're not on the phone call right now. But I will answer a couple of questions that I can answer there. One is, yes, DC Health is collecting data about COVID cases in childcare, as they are about a range of public health data related to the public health emergency in the district. That data is not currently publicly available, but I know that they do look very seriously at that data and take the analytics seriously as they look at what is happening and help try to inform a variety of folks in the district to make decisions that can support public health. I can't answer your question about the regional collaboration. It is something that if Dr. Mangla doesn't join the call and get to hear from you directly in this conversation, I'll make sure that we share back that question through our channels so that we can share that information with folks and hear more about it. There is not a timeline currently for when sort of group sizes in childcare facilities may change. As you know, our collective understanding of COVID-19 does continue to evolve as more research is conducted and evidence is collected. That's the data that DC Health uses to inform the group sizes and other guidance that they give us, along with trends and data locally and nationally. Once DC Health does determine that it's safe to increase the group size, OSSI will update our health and safety guidance for providers to reflect any changes in that, and we will share that information with this group as soon as possible. Again, I can't say if or when that will happen, but that is the way that that process would happen if it did.
Thank you. The next comment in the chat is, well, since the decision has been made and without considering the effects on our business, what's the point? Why are we here? The next question is related to licensing. To help address the limitations on instructional space and max census, can we stagger the times outside of the times approved in our license?
I think that you would need to talk directly with your licensing specialist about specifically what you have in mind to make sure that that the answer is appropriate to your particular solution, but I would encourage you to reach out and do that.
And then I'll do a question from the Mentimeter, and then I'll go to the next person with their raised hand. The question from the Mentimeter is, one way that you may support providers is by increasing ratios. Is this something the district is considering prior to November 1st when the new subsidy policy starts?
I'm not sure if that was a question about group sizes that we were just talking about, and if so, I can't say more than that about it. Or if it was a question about ratios within groups. One thing that I will note is that providers do have an option to apply for waivers of the 2 adults in a classroom rule if you want to separate groups. And that is an option you may want to discuss if that is something you're interested in doing.
The next person with a raised hand is LaShawn Wilson.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. I have a question about reimbursement for subsidy for enrollment increases. Now, I know in my situation, I'm a newer center. I recently opened the end of 2019. So the reimbursable period average was from October to January. But in my case, they had to do an average based on February and March. But my increase now, I've increased my enrollment by double the amount. So will there be any reconsideration for retroactive pay for the increased enrollment?
Thanks for raising that question. It is this type of situation is a situation that has been on our mind in thinking about this this policy. The being locked into paying based on the average payment did have some implications for our ability to adjust payments when we're serving additional populations or different populations of children or taking on new subsidy eligible children, and we have heard concerns about that from a number of people. Under the policy guidance that's been put out so far, providers who enroll new children before November 1st will continue to receive the facility's average monthly payment for fiscal year 2020 from October 1st, 2019 through January 31st, 2020. So the way people have been paid. OSSI will return to processing payments based on attendance beginning November 1st, 2020, meaning that providers would receive payment for newly enrolled children in their November payment, which is received in December. Extending the current policy through the end of October has provided additional stability and some additional time for providers who are considering whether or not to reopen or serving lower enrollment right now, but it does delay payment for new additional children an additional month. As we look at other options for providing financial supports to providers, again, this is one factor that we are taking into consideration.
So you are thinking about probably in this case, in my case, it's been like I've doubled my enrollment. Okay, so in the last few months, I've carried an additional 35 to 40 children in my program that I'm not being reimbursed for.
And you will definitely start being reimbursed for those children after November 1st. I realize that's probably a very unsatisfying answer to you. And as I said, as we look at the variety of options we have, this is one of the factors we're taking into consideration.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to combine two questions that one is from the chat and one is from the Mentimeter. So I'll put them together. The first question is, if we accept school-age children for full-day service, will there be a pay adjustment to include full pay for these students starting the full-day service starts? Which I think is a similar question to the previous one. And then the next question that's related is, will we be responsible for the educational success of school-age children if we take them on full day?
Yeah, no, I appreciate both of those questions. So when the updated guidance goes into effect, subsidy providers that are open and providing full-time care for preschool or school-age children will receive the full-time rate for children receiving subsidy for any days that the District of Columbia Public Schools are in a district learning posture. Again, that policy will not go into effect until the entire policy goes into effect, which will happen at the beginning of November. I will note we don't need to get into that detail right now. We have gotten some questions from people about, will you be responsible for children's educational success? So if a child is enrolled in DCPS or a public charter school, that school is accountable for the child's educational success. However, the child's family is responsible for ensuring that their child attends school every day unless the child has a valid excuse to be absent. That doesn't change if a parent chooses to place their child in childcare while schools are in a virtual posture. Ensuring that children attend school is still the family's responsibility. We know that some childcare providers are supporting families who need childcare while schools are in a virtual posture, and that families are seeking this type of care. It's a provider's decision whether to provide school-age services to school-age children who are doing distance learning through DC public and public charter schools, and whether and how you're able to support children in participating in their school's virtual learning activities while in care. Families should discuss with the child care provider if their child needs to be engaged in school activities while they're in care to ensure common understanding and expectations, but that does not make the child care provider responsible for the educational success of a child who's enrolled in a DCPS or a public charter school.
Thank you. So I think we have a few people with their hands up. Elsa Gayam?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, how you doing, everybody? My question is, how much they are ready parents to start the children in the school? Is there any kind of data about that? Second, what about in terms of employees? Because are they ready also to get employees? We are asking, but they are not ready yet to start the work. And how it works is that if we open it and you told us we will start according to attendance, if these two things, if it is not ready, we could not able to continue our business. Just you told us we are ready to open, and you told us to open because we are essential. What about if you did not customer? What do you do? What do you do? Do you put it in consideration this? Also about the employment, what about the CDA at this time? Is that a requirement? What about if they have experiences and they don't have CDA? With all the shortage of the employees, can we hire them? Thank you.
I think there were three different questions there, so I'll try to walk through them in order. I think one was a question about families, whether families are ready and willing to return to care. Then I think a second question was about workers and whether workers are ready to return to work. And then I think a third question was a question about the CDA requirement. So families do need to make their own decisions about whether and when to return to care, as well as the kinds of care that they choose. And we know that families are weighing a variety of factors, including the demands of their work, their own and their children's and family members' health and risk factors, children's need for socialization and early learning, and the broader state of public health in the district when they're making these decisions. OSSI is working to support families in making these choices by providing health and safety guidance and technical assistance to support the health and safety of children and staff in childcare, by providing information and tools that providers can use to communicate with families about health and safety precautions and what families can do to support health and safety of children in care, and by supporting DC Child Care Connections, which provides information to families about childcare and helps connect families with needed care. We know that families are contacting DC Child Care Connections seeking care, and that we're seeing more families reaching out than has been the case in past years. And our decision to return to paying subsidy based on attendance is based in part on a recognition that subsidy families who need care but whose usual providers are closed need to be able to move with their children to open providers and to have the subsidy move with them. In terms of the workforce, we know that DC Child Care Connections is running a job board or a resource that can help both childcare workers who are seeking employment if they have lost their jobs or are newly seeking employment in the field, as well as providers who are looking to hire staff. I know somebody from DC Child Care Connections, I think, has joined the call. Do you want to share any more information about either the resources available for families seeking care or about sort of resources that are available for childcare facilities who may need to hire or recruit additional teachers or staff or childcare employees who are looking for new employment?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Sarah. This is Dale Brown from DC Child Care Connections. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Can hear me? Okay. All right. Oh, since June, we have more than doubled the requests for child care from parents. We started out with 161 requests in June, and now we're at 351. That was in August. And the majority of the requests are for school-age children, which is interesting. It started out with being infant and toddlers. Now it's moved up to school age. So since there are a number of new providers that have opened, over 200 now, we've been having really good success in placing them. We've instituted within the last 2 weeks, calls to the providers to get their vacancy information. So we're calling on a weekly basis, and we also have a Google form that we're sending out. So in case you can't answer the phone because you're busy, you can send us automatically your information about your vacancy. So we're doing that. So there are a number of them coming in. We've also accepted emails for child placement, so that has more than doubled. As far as your job force, we have a job board. It's on DC Child Care Connections website. We can put that in the chat, DC Child Care Connections. I think it's ossi.dcchildcareconnections.org. And you can go on and put your types of employees you're looking for. And if you need some assistance, you can always call DC Child Care Connections from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And the number is 829-2500 or 678-0027. What's interesting about the calls we're getting now is not just for childcare. So we're trying to figure out, how we refer parents to other services within the district, and so they won't be so frustrated. But we are supporting many parents through our regular channels and also to the over 100 partners that we've established over the last 4 years. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask them.
Thanks, Dale. Is there any way for folks to be able to identify on your website who is currently open and providing services?
Yes, there's a link. Yes, there's a link that shows the open childcare centers, and we can certainly make that available to you. In fact, I sent some things out today. Yes.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. We'd love to share that in our follow-up email.
Okay. Absolutely.
So we have a few people with their hands up. I'm going to call on Kamisha Philpotts first.
Hi. Some of my questions were answered. Well, weren't answered. You read them off. But my main concern is, what do we tell our parents who, like I said, are not safe with coming back and want to continue distant learning? And my greatest question is, how is that not equivalent to them coming to school when in fact they're getting more through Zooms and the teachers are taking more certified development courses? I mean, we've been working so hard, and to act as though our distant learning is not even considered. That's my first question. And my second question is, if the school is open and some people don't want to come back, can we still offer distant learning and get credit for it in our attendance? Because we will be physically at the school educating the kids. Because without that, how will they get an education is my question or concern.
I appreciate you asking the question. Currently, the subsidy reimbursements under the policy that will be going into place and that has been in place are based on in-person attendance. We have heard from a number of folks about virtual learning and are looking into how we might take that into account in other financial resources.
Okay, so for now, we just have to wait and don't give our parents any heads up, or?
We'll try to communicate with you about that as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you.
The next person, go ahead.
Rakaya, I realized I didn't answer Ms. Guyam's question about the CDA.
Go ahead.
We understand that that is a challenge for people right now. You can apply for a waiver for that from licensing. And we are also looking at the larger picture of the deadline there, which we've heard from a number of people about. I also see that a number of folks have asked a question about the October 5th enrollment audit. I believe that's a reference to the October 5th enrollment audit for PKEEP programs. That is a date that is fixed in code and applies to both the local education agencies and the PKEEP programs. And it will still be in place this year. One thing I do want to flag for people, because we have gotten a question about this from other people, is that while it is perfectly acceptable for a child who is attending distance learning in a DCPS or public charter school to be enrolled in a child care facility, at the same time, if their parents are seeking in-person care during distance learning, a child cannot be enrolled at the same time in both a PKEEP program and a public charter or DCPS school, because under the way that system operates, that's equivalent to being enrolled in two DCPS schools or being enrolled in a charter school and DCPS at the same time, and it's not permitted. So I would urge folks who are PKEEP providers to make sure that the parents you work with are aware of that and understand that, so that neither they or you get any surprises after October 5th.
Thank you. Next, with their hand up is Shannon Cooley.
My question is, hi everybody. My question is, my parents say they want to come back, but they're not coming back. So do we terminate their space? Is their space still available to them like it was? What do we do?
Could you say the question again? I had a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Okay, so my parents state they want to come back, but they haven't came back yet. So do we terminate their space? Is this space still available to them because it's based on in-person attendance? Will that 10-day attendance be paid? I mean, the 10 days that they miss will be paid and they roll over to the next month. What will happen in that aspect?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that question. So attendance will continue to be submitted monthly but the number of unexcused absences will increase November 1st. And providers should still be submitting attendance even now while we're paying by average monthly payment. If you have a family that says they want to come back but is not actually returning, you may choose to terminate the space if you want to offer the space to another family. We have increased the number of unexcused absences pay for to 10, and we would continue to pay for those 10 unexcused absences starting November 1st.
Thank you. The next question is from the chat. It is, when DCPS resumes in November at full capacity, will CBOs be allowed to go back to full capacity?
So I don't want to speak for what DCPS may or may not do in the future in this conversation. As we learn what DCPS is doing and firm plans move ahead, we will continue to think about what implications that has for various folks. Again, the guidance related to the number of children that can be in a group in a child care facility, or really the number of people, children and adults that can be in a group, is guidance that comes out of the direction set by DC Health. And I, as I said earlier, can't predict when or if they may make changes in that guidance. But I do know that the guidance that they give us is informed by looking at research. It's informed by looking at data from national and local trends.
Okay, so for now, you're saying that you don't have any guidance about whether or not folks will be able to go back to full capacity in November.
If that's a question specifically about the health and safety guidance in terms of the group size limits, I don't think that has necessarily a direct connection to decisions DCPS is making.
Okay. I will read one more question from the chat, and then we have a few folks on deck for with their hands up. So the question from the chat is, can you explain why a pre-KEEP program can offer hybrid or virtual learning and a CBO that has a preschool pre-K program can't? If they want to get reimbursed, what's the difference?
Yeah, the pre-KEEP program has some slightly different requirements that folks have to meet that we're holding them to, and that is also done because of the need for pre-KEEP programs to be kept at parity with the LEAs.
Next, with their hand up, Tawana McMickens.
Yes, hi, this is Tawana McMickens. Okay, so I got to put my hand down, but my question was answered. It was, the question was asking about providers being paid for only when the children are in the facility. So I think I understand it now that we're not getting paid for the children that are not in the facility. I had it all in my head wrong. So what's happening with this is that if there are no children, I'm so sorry. Can you clarify that for me again? The providers not being paid for the children, or is that on the fact that the children are, you're increasing the absent days? I think that's where I'm going.
So at the beginning of November, we will return to paying subsidy providers based on attendance, actual in-person attendance of children in the facility. We are also at that time going to increase the number of unexcused absences for which providers can be paid to 10 per month, recognizing that there are a wider range of reasons that families and children may be absent during the time. And we have also provided guidance explaining that COVID-related absences are considered excused and providers can be paid for up to 15 excused absences. And we've laid out some of the reasons that would be excused and the documentation that would need to be provided.
Right, okay. So, okay, that's where I understood it when you, okay, thank you.
And if you have more detailed questions about that, please feel free to follow up offline. I may not be fully understanding all the dimensions of your question in the moment.
Oh, no problem. I will. Thank you.
Folks, we are just 6 minutes away from our hard stop at 6 p.m. So I have 2 more people with their hands up. Tanza Terrell.
Yes, hello, how are you doing? Good afternoon, everyone. So I had a question about in regards to group size. What do we do if there, with the parents that we would have to eliminate because of group size? How will we be able to compensate? How will we be able to make sure that they're still giving care because we can only have a minimum amount of persons in the room? So is there any consideration of allowing those parents to still receive care virtually? Because it's still going to be a need for having parents needing care if we can only have a specific amount of children. So my thought is that number of parents needing care will still be elevated if we still cannot have so many. So my concern is really for a parent. I'm a parent and educator, and it just it's going to really just be boggling. How do you do a checklist of who stays, who goes? Like, what will we do?
No, I really appreciate that question. We have not provided any specific guidance for providers on how to prioritize families. If you have more families that want to attend your program than spaces available, that is a decision that you will need to make yourself. We would encourage folks to have conversations with families to understand what families want, if families want to remain with the program, if families need to find another program that has a space available for them to attend in person. If they do need to move to another provider, DC Child Care Connections is a resource that can help facilitate that. And we have directions on how to make those transfers as well. But we understand that may not be the option that parents want, and that may not be the option that is best for you either. So that's the best guidance I can give you at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. The last person with their hand up is Micah Bump. Okay, Mike, are you there? If not, I will pull the final question from our 3-page list of questions from the last town hall. And one of them was, if my childcare facility has to close or a group has to stay home because of a COVID case, are all of those absences excused for all of the folks who have to stay home?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. And yes, if there is a need for the facility to be closed due to a COVID-related case at the direction of DC Health, or with documentation of the circumstances, then yes, those absences can be considered excused.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah, for fielding all of those questions. We didn't quite get through all of them, but we got pretty close. So thank all of you for your patience and for sharing your questions and concerns. Please feel free to continue sending them in the Menti or to me via email. I believe Nisa will pull up my email on the last slide. And we can make sure that those questions are included and we'll share them with Asi. And I think I just want to wrap up with a few of the things that we asked for in the last call. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we carried the ask from the childcare community to kind of extend implementation of this guidance until December 31st. What we heard today from Sarah was that the decision has been made not to make that extension, essentially. Is that correct, Sarah?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and then the second thing that we asked was for more coordination and communication with the early learning community. I heard you talk a little bit about some opportunities that might exist. How will you share more opportunities as they become available?
Yes, so we're looking to continue to work in partnership with you and some of the other organizations and associations that hosted this conversation. We also do have our Child Care Recovery Working Group that a number of providers are participating in. We continue to have our bi-weekly calls with the early childhood education community that are open to any stakeholders that want to participate. The next one of those will be on October 13th. And we're also working to engage with a variety of networks that OSSI already works with through the Quinn and the PKEEP providers. I know there were a number of additional questions in the chat about the PKEEP program, and so we'll work to make sure that we're answering that question for those folks in those conversations.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, well, that is it for the day. If you have any questions that were not answered, please feel rest assured that we will make sure that OSSI receives them. There are also a lot of comments and some feedback on what OSSI can do to better support childcare providers, so we will share those with OSSI as well. Thank you all so much for joining, and thanks, Sarah, for joining us a second time. Have a good evening, everyone.